Hi, everybody, and welcome to the PropLinq AI podcast. I'm Stuart Quintal, and today we're diving into a really fascinating corner of the built environment world, healthy buildings, well-being-led design. And my guest is Joanna Frank, President and CEO of Fitwel. Thank you so much for joining us, Joanna.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, look, to sort of kick things off, tell us a little bit about your journey. What drew you into real estate, architecture, and also this idea of design for human health.
Sure. Yeah, I started as an architect actually, but very quickly moved into real estate development here in New York City, where I'm based. And then 2008 happened, and obviously the real estate market was not great. Certainly in New York here, it was in a bit of a mess. And so I joined the Bloomberg administration. Michael Bloomberg was then mayor of New York City, and he invited me to run a multi-agency program called Active Design. And Active Design was really the first initiative that took data and public health research and translated it into design strategies, operational strategies that would improve the quality of life for New Yorkers. And so we implemented that Active Design policy across basically all of New York City, the streetscapes, buildings, housing, et cetera, to really prioritize people. And that was the beginning of Fitwel, which was really kind of continuing the work after the administration ended and creating a standard that defined a healthy built environment for people. And then how do you create that into a certification, and how do you take that global? But it really started here in New York City, and a data-driven approach, which I know Michael is very well known for.
Yeah. With it starting in New York City, and especially during that period of 2008 onwards, what are some of the standout sort of design aspects that did change in New York City that you're quite proud of?
Yeah, so the city itself, like the streetscape, went from really being car-centric, so prioritizing the movement of cars through the city, to really being people-centric. So how do you see the street as the public realm, which belongs to all people, and really kind of address that balance or redress the balance, to give more of the space to pedestrians, more of the space to cyclists, active transportation, and then obviously still some of it to cars, but just to kind of redress the balance. And by doing that, you create all kinds of opportunities like these pocket parks, creating all these areas on the sidewalk to sit and watch the world go by, closing some streets and making them into pedestrian plazas and so on, which not only really increased the quality of life of New Yorkers, but it also attracted talent, which was one of the main kind of business reasons for New York City to do this. Was how do we attract investment in New York City? And what the data showed us was to attract investment, especially tech and finance, we needed to attract talent. And what talent was telling us they wanted was quality of life. They basically wanted Copenhagen. So how do we create Copenhagen in New York? So that is what we did, and it has been very successful in attracting investment, talent, increasing retail sales, et cetera. So financially successful, as well as obviously affecting the quality of life. And I think that those lessons and measuring the impact that we learned way back then are the things that I think continue to be really to resonate with people, because in an era now where a lot of claims are made across all kinds of different outcomes, being able to demonstrate that it's evidence-based and having a measurable impact is really what differentiates cities, but also private real estate developers.
Yeah. I mean, my journey, my trip I've been to New York City before in like 2016 or 2017. And look, I always loved wandering around the back streets, the alleyways, finding the good coffee shops, because coming from Melbourne, we like to find all the good coffee, which mostly is Melburnians setting up good coffee shops there. But yeah, I sort of loved walking around the city streets there. That's just my personal anecdote there, but I can appreciate the work that went in probably over the last 10 years before that. When you moved or setting up Fitwel, what was the biggest pain point or insight that you were responding to, and what did you see that was missing in the market or the environment, the ecosystem that helped set up Fitwel?
Fitwel was created at a time where we had a lot of individual case studies that, like New York City, and some property developers as well here in the States that we were working with individually as a company to really optimize their assets individually, but in a bespoke way. Actually, we worked with Lendlease, speaking of Australia. They were one of our earliest clients who wanted to replicate what New York had done, but for a private portfolio. So how do we look at master plan communities and design standards and really optimize them for people? But a bespoke approach is never going to be able to scale. And so we needed to be able to define a healthy built environment in a way that would be applicable across many different asset types, and really focusing on existing buildings as well as new construction, because of course, most of us experience existing buildings. 90% of the buildings that we experience, are existing. So how do we take existing buildings and optimize them? How do we understand the definition of a healthy building? Because I think it isn't something that's innate to real estate developers. I think it feels a little far from what we've been taught is real estate development, which I think things like sustainability as far as water use and energy use is a little bit more tangible, but building trust, building community, mental health outcomes, all of these things for the real estate industry felt a long way away from the practice of the bricks and mortar that we're all really familiar with and expert in. So I think bridging that gap between you as the creators of our built environment and the managers of our built environment as developers are having a measurable impact on health outcomes, even if you don't know it, and the impact of responding to the demand of the people you're serving is impacting the value of your real estate, even if you don't know how to quantify it. So I think it was very important for us to first be able to define a health promoting environment in a way that was tangible and measurable, and backed by the evidence base. There's 7,000 peer-reviewed research studies behind the Fitwel standard. So a very significant evidence base, which allows us to quantify impact. And then on the other side, we also look at the economic evidence base around, okay, so you've put in these various different strategies to make your project more walkable, for example. So you've put in street trees, you've renovated the sidewalk, you've put in street furniture like benches. We know that incrementally each of these things does impact the walkability. How does that also impact the value of your asset? So very important that we can demonstrate that really prioritizing people using the design and operation of your buildings is also directly impacting value for that asset. And therefore, this is core business and not just a kind of cherry on top. So I think that you need a standard to be able to do that. It needs to be evidence-based and it needs to be quantifiable so that you can have conversations that are core business conversations and not kind of nice to have conversations.
Over the years since since your launch, or over the years, what has been the biggest shift you've noticed with the owners, investors, and designers when they think about health in buildings?
Yeah, so when we started this conversation, which was about 10 years ago at this point, people didn't believe us. Like, we really had to spend the first half of a conversation demonstrating that your built environment, where you live, where you work, the design of your home, the design of the neighborhood has an impact on your life expectancy. It has an impact on your mental health outcomes. It has an impact on productivity. It has an impact on tenant satisfaction. We had to lay out the argument that that actually was the case. We do not need to do that anymore. I think COVID really changed the narrative, where now everybody has felt how the built environment they're exposed to, where they were living, the neighborhoods they were living in, really did affect their ability to go outside, their mental health, how isolated they felt during that period of time. So it really became something that folks experienced, everybody experienced. And so I think that has been a massive shift across the whole population, not just the real estate developers, that we no longer have to make the argument that your health is affected by the design and location of where you live and where you work, which is a very large shift, because that means now that the demand for health and wellness from your homes and from your offices is being led by consumers. It's being led by people. And so that's a very big shift in demand, where pre-COVID, certainly on the residential side, people were not asking, they were not associating health outcomes with where they lived. It had started to shift on the office side, where employees were looking for quality of life and social experiences and good food access and stuff from their office environments, especially the younger generation of the workforce. That obviously accelerated somewhat post-COVID, although there's a whole back to office added piece of the puzzle. But it's certainly on the residential side, it is now a very significant differentiator in the marketplace. And we're seeing real estate developers who are adopting health and really optimizing quality of life, which is what we're talking about here, are outperforming their own pro formas, outperforming the market, and are able to be really successful in marketing their properties because of that consumer demand.
Yep. You've talked about a few things there, especially around like the residential and also the commercial space. Sort of asking like, what's your ideal customer profile? Like, who does Fitwel sort of see as their customer?
So our primary customer are the largest owners and managers of real estate in the world. So the big asset managers and the big owners of portfolios. And the reason that we really work with that group of developers, owners, asset managers is because we know that they influence the whole market and we're a small team. And so how do we go out and work with the folks that influence the rest of the market? So our first user was Tishman Speyer, a big real estate owner here in New York, who owns Rockefeller Center, for those folks who know New York. They own a global portfolio as well. So Tishman were our first user, and then using Fitwel, really, we were able to get a lot of attention. And obviously, they are a very credible real estate developer. Everybody knows that they are very careful and considered when they're making business decisions. So that obviously reflected very well on our credibility as a standard and as a business case. So we've always kind of courted and really worked with the big real estate investment trusts as well, so the big publicly traded real estate companies. A lot of the large insurance companies we work with as well, so people like PGIM, which is Prudential, MetLife, Manulife, etc. I think because they obviously have very large real estate holdings, but they are also very data-driven in their decision-making. So this is an easy argument for us to make with those teams because they believe in the data, they see the risk because they are also insurance companies. And so they are looking for solutions for that risk. So I think that they've been great advocates for the use of Fitwel. And then I know you're based in Dubai. We've been working a lot with folks in the UAE generally, and our largest customer in the region is Aldar, who are obviously based in Abu Dhabi, but also develop across the region. And they are using Fitwel across their pipeline of real estate portfolio. So that's amazing. They've been an incredible partner. And I'll actually be coming to Dubai to speak with Jonathan Emery, who's the CEO of Aldar, in a couple of weeks' time. There's a big global wellness summit that's happening in Dubai. And we will be speaking about all the work that Aldar has been doing around really promoting health and wellness towards the longevity priorities that the UAE has set.
Yeah, I understand and know them quite well. Aldar's been a client in the past of some of my businesses. Now, like bringing this focus into the market you're operating in, like as you just sort of mentioned, you're running Fitwel globally. Now, sort of with today's markets, so we got higher interest rates, occupancy challenges. You mentioned it before, and the back to work, return to work. I know companies and people are struggling with figuring out, is it hybrid, is it full time, is it mixture? People aren't too sure what's going on. What are you seeing as the biggest opportunities and also the headwinds when it comes to the healthy building certification?
Yeah, so I would say, as far as, each sector actually is in quite a different place at this point, which is interesting because I think I would have put them all together more before COVID. But we are seeing on the office side, we're seeing this continued race to quality where your Class A office in a prime location with health and wellness features and all of those amenities are actually experiencing really high occupancy. I know in New York City, we have actually occupancy rates that are higher than they were pre-COVID in the prime downtown Manhattan. So we are seeing London, obviously, maybe it's not obvious that I'm British, but I am actually British. London also, but any of these kind of large centers of commerce, we are seeing a strong return to work around assets that have all of the above. Right? You have to be able to demonstrate that this is a great physical place to bring your company, that we are able to show actually that, you know, having great daylight, good indoor air quality is meeting the demand of your employees, because employees are very well informed now and are asking about things like indoor environment generally, air quality specifically. So very high on the list of what employees are looking for if you're looking to attract and retain talent. We are also seeing as a business that having a good indoor environment is also correlated to higher productivity and staff retention, et cetera, and like employee satisfaction. So I think that it is in everybody's interest to think about the indoor environment from a kind of a pure business perspective, and then also obviously that kind of employee satisfaction, tenant satisfaction opportunity. So I think the office side for Class A, it makes sense, but it also makes sense for Class B, because the folks that maybe are not in the prime location, which is still driving occupancy, are able to differentiate their Class B office space by having really strong health and wellness features. So you can't obviously move the building, but you can differentiate yourself in that market from other Class B office spaces or from other folks that are in, you know, a less than optimal location. So we are still seeing strong demand because employers and employees are demanding it. So that's one of those big shifts. On the residential side, I mean, the market where you are in the UAE is very strong as far as new build and the kind of absorption of that new build into the market, and sales, I understand, are very strong in the region this year. So that
there's always a launch. There's always a new launch happening almost every week, and there's a lot of completions coming up over the next 18 months, 2 years that were started, I guess, post COVID, to fuel that demand.
Yeah, absolutely. But I
Yep.
think that the demand is being realized, and the market is actually selling well, selling quickly, outperforming perhaps the pro formas that they were designed for to meet. So very strong market in UAE. The US market is challenged at the moment because we have increased, obviously, interest rates you already mentioned are still higher than real estate would like. Having been a real estate developer, you know, 0 was a great interest rate for real estate.
I think it was great for everyone for a long time.
Right, I'm not sure. But the interest rates are still challenging. I think the unpredictable nature of the interest rates make it challenging, especially for new construction. And then compounding that, we have increase in labor costs and also increase or uncertainty about the cost of materials. So very, very difficult to pencil out new construction in the States right now, residential or otherwise. And so I think that makes new building very challenging. What we're seeing is existing buildings looking to reposition themselves. So one of the big demands for using Fitwel is for existing buildings, and we were really specifically designed for existing buildings. And so how do you take your vintage, to use a term of art, your vintage garden style property, which is maybe 20, 25 years old at this point, and then how do you use Fitwel to really upgrade that property, make fairly minimal capital improvements, but maybe make operational improvements, et cetera, in order to reposition that asset, because you are not building new at this point in the market. So I think a lot of repositioning of existing assets on the residential side, especially in the less urban locations, the suburban and ex-urban locations are still seeing strong growth in the marketplace. So I think that there is growth. And then the kind of the hero of the story right now is student housing. So globally,
Okay.
there's a huge demand for more student housing. There's a lack of student housing across the world. There's an increase in students looking for housing because of some kind of shifts in their behavior, where more students are wanting to leave home when they go to university, whereas culturally, in some countries, it was more typical to go to university locally. So demand for student housing, but also demand for health. So the Gen Z are very aware of mental health outcomes, and that they are really looking for a place to live, a place to stay while they're students that is really optimized for their mental health, for socializing, has to be environmentally sustainable also. So a very highly informed generation who are asking for health by name and really asking for environments that support mental health. And so there, the kind of correlation between core business and health is very strong and undeniable, and we really don't have to make a business case for that asset type.
Excellent. So when you set the Class B, are you using sort of the certification by Fitwel or Fitwel as a way to help build the case that health is more nice to have? Perspective.
Yeah, I mean, health is. I mean, when we're saying health, we're really talking about holistic health. So, how is a building affecting your physical activity levels, your physical health, your mental health, but also levels of trust, your willingness to socialize, etc. So, it's really all of the above. It's quality of life that we're talking about, and the evidence base is very strong that responding to the demand in the market is directly correlated to return on investment, increased net operating income, increased tenant satisfaction, increased tenant retention, reducing risk, especially when you start looking at the strategies around flood risk, fire risk, etc. We look at it from a people perspective, which really means that the risk, you are absorbing the risk as far as the value of your property is concerned before a physical event. So if you are in a flood zone, that is going to change people's perception about the value of that property long before that property floods. So that's where it becomes a kind of an early indicator of the risk to the value of the property. And what can you do about it? Not just identify it as a risk. How do you create a more resilient building in the face of the risks that exist and will continue to evolve, actually? So at this point, we have to accept that as a real estate industry, we have to both continue to reduce the impact that we are having on climate change at the same time as acknowledge the fact that climate change is happening and is affecting people first and foremost. So how can we use our buildings to create a resilient environment that really maintains the quality of life for people, with all of the kind of the pieces that we can employ? I think a good example of that is heat mitigation. You're in Dubai. We were just talking about that it's starting to cool down, but obviously, there are times of the year in some regions, including New York, actually, where it's really difficult to be outside for any length of time. So how can we use our buildings to reduce both the building temperature, but also the air temperature? Because it's the air temperature that really affects human health. And so, things like having green roofs, light colored materials, et cetera, which seem quite simple, actually have a very significant impact on the building temperature, up to about 40 degrees reduction, which in turn has about 5 degrees reduction in air temperature. And what we're able to quantify is that for every degree of cooling, of air cooling, there's about a $50 increase in rent premium and $1,000 of energy savings. So there you can see how it starts to really all join together, all the pieces come together to show that it's really about optimizing your asset, right? So yes, it's from a people perspective, but why are you building the building if it isn't for people?
Well, you've sort of segued into what I like to talk about a lot is like the technology system and systems sort of thing. So you've mentioned a lot of sort of data points. So I want to sort of dig into like systems operational, like especially where like maybe AI or data or automation play a role or could play a role in the business. So in, say, the operations at Fitwel, what tools or systems are most essential for managing certification, benchmarking, data collection, and reporting? Like, I guess the list could go on, but tell us how the operations fit well from a data perspective on work.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have always seen ourselves first and foremost as a data platform, and that the certification piece of the work that we do is really about validating the inputs into the system. So when you tell us about an attribute of your real estate, is it true? And that's what certification is doing, basically, right? We're saying, yes, this data point you've given us is accurate. So we have an amazing database of both that evidence base I mentioned, the 7,000 peer-reviewed research studies. So those are coming from academic institutions around the world. But what we've done is we've collected them all together, we've analyzed them, and using an algorithm that was developed by the US Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the US CDC, they created an algorithm at the beginning of Fitwel, which really quantifies the impact of each of those strategies on the various different health outcomes. So that's very important, obviously, for the conversation, that it then becomes something that you can rank impact. So you can say, this strategy is having a greater measurable impact on mental health, for example, than this other strategy, or this strategy is impacting physical health more than another strategy. So being able to quantify impact and quantify how substantial the evidence base is very important for credibility. And then it also becomes very important for that data set that we have. So on the input side, we have all of that peer-reviewed research coming into the system that is then represented by 150 strategies, which is the Fitwel standard. Each of those strategies has a ranking, so you get a different number of points per strategy, and that is based on that algorithm. So that is the way that you can start to actually set benchmarks and then a really kind of an asset roadmap. So not just, did I get a certification, but what are the existing conditions of my building and what should I prioritize in order to continuously improve the performance of that building? So that's what this is about. This isn't about just a gold star, right? It's about, how do I take what I have and make it better in a way that's measurable and quantifiable over time. So we also benchmark. We provide gap analysis, which is fed to you, customized for your asset. So the order of impact and the order that we present those strategies to you would be what's going to have the greatest impact for this asset specifically. But the other thing that we're able to do with our tech platform is really look for efficiencies. So a lot of the folks we work with have hundreds, if not thousands, of assets. How do you ensure that this is efficient to be used at scale? So where are the efficiencies? How can we kind of set standard policies, say around indoor air quality, around maintenance plans, et cetera, and really kind of find efficiencies for real estate, because real estate hasn't really been operated in an efficient way in the past. So that's important.
Well, I mean, that sort of you're highlighting there with like, if something that's Joanna has hundreds of app sites, each site could have different, obviously different technologies in there, different cooling systems, different, all different types of things that, are quite bespoke to each building. So, I'll let you continue, but it's quite a challenge there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you want to find the efficiencies across a fund or across a portfolio, but you also have to, all of the feedback has to be asset specific, because we all know that for a property to be successful, it needs to be contextually specific. One size does not fit all in real estate, not if you want to be successful. So yeah, having those tailored solutions and having them instantly as well, that's what tech gives you, instant responses, which is exciting. And actually, today is a great day to be talking to you, because we this week have just launched the start of our auto scoring. So what we're doing there is that we're pulling in data sets, external data sets, and answering the questions for you. So kind of flipping the script for certification. So typically all of the certifications out there, whether it's Fitwel or LEED or BREEAM, they ask you to tell, they ask the question, and you as the developer, you as the owner, provides that response. What we are now able to do, because of the data that's out there, is that we are able to answer the question for you. So the first set of strategies that we're answering for you are the location strategies. So rather than you telling us if this is a walkable location, we're telling you that this is a walkable location or not. And that's exciting, because one of the big barriers that we see to using a certification is the amount of time that it takes to do the paperwork. And that is not useful to anybody. So we want to how do we minimize that kind of those repetitive tasks, that kind of not very valuable use of time in creating paperwork, and how do we get the asset managers or the folks working with real estate to that point of, okay, so what? What does this mean? What should I do? How do I make improvements? So that's exciting. And we will continue to roll out more of those auto score features over time.
Yep. Where, you said, being a data platform, and you've got obviously lots of hundreds and thousands of probably millions of data points that are coming in from both the research and modeling, the data they're collecting, everything else. Like how is that then presented? Is that presented to an asset owner in an analytics platform or package, or is it interactive, or do they just have the raw data and then they need to interpret that with their own analysts and such? How are you presenting that? Are you using technology to translate all that data into something that's easy to digest, I guess, for a developer?
Yeah, so Fitwel is a tech platform. So you do have the kind of the dashboard that you see some of the kind of high level impact. So you see how your portfolio is impacting health, how your portfolio is impacting ROI, NOI, etc. And then you can drill down all the way down to how that individual asset is impacting those kind of high level measures. And then we have a scale certification, which folks are using fund wide. For the scale certification, we also give you a peer benchmark. So we give you an analysis not just of your asset performance and your fund performance, but also in relation to the rest of the industry. So that really allows folks to start to say, okay, we are in the top 20th percentile for this asset or for this fund. So that's important because absolute performance is interesting. Relative performance is something that real estate perhaps values more. One of our large clients, who I shan't name, said, I don't need to be perfect. I just need to be 10% better than my competitors. It's just like, yeah, okay, that's fair. And we do see big differences across asset types. So we see very different performance for industrial assets compared to residential assets compared to office. I would say office are the highest performing assets, perhaps because they've been thinking about it longer, then residential, then industrial. And then there are certain subsets of strategies. Safety, for example, industrial outperforms the other asset types around safety because they've been focusing on it for longer. It has greater impact on their overall business performance. So it is interesting that peer-to-peer analysis, I think, is perhaps more interesting than just a general kind of, did I get a gold star? So Fitwel does provide star recognition as well. We have between 1 and 3 stars. To get 3 stars is very difficult. Only a very small percentage of the folks who get certified, probably around 5% annually, get 3 stars. So you can see that that's a very high bar in order to reach that. Yeah, so we have a lot of data. We'd love to do more, and we will do more with our data because it is exciting. But it's, yeah.
Speaking of like data, and where do you think like the biggest untapped win is for, say, AI in your field?
I think it's continuing this theme of flipping the script. So rather than you telling us what you've done, we want to be telling you what you should do. So in order to optimize an asset in this location, you should focus on XYZ, which isn't very far from where we are today with a gap analysis. But I do think that to me would be exciting because then you can start to validate what we determine is optimum for each asset. So I think that will really help to scale the conversation. I think the other big opportunity is to demonstrate this core business piece. And so to continue to drill down into how are these strategies directly impacting return on investment and net operating income in ways that the financial decision makers can really incorporate into their overall financial analysis. So I think that's, kind of the valuation piece. I think there's a big opportunity there to really merge these two ideas and answer that question, right? Because that is the question. How does this impact the value of my asset?
Yep. Right. Well, Joanna, before we wrap, thinking ahead, from, how do you see this view of this area evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? And what role do you see Fitwel playing in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I see very strong consumer demand. So I think that we're going to shift. The last few years, this has been part of ESG, right? We're the S in ESG. So that was very much more of a kind of an investor-led demand for certification. in order to comply with investor demands, ESG reporting, certainly coming out of Europe, the regulation and so on. I think the big shift that we're seeing in the market is now that this is really becoming more of a consumer-led demand. And so that is going to necessitate changes to the way that real estate talks about what it's doing, quantification. How do we ensure that consumers are well informed about what is really impactful as opposed to what folks say is impactful? So I think even more importance for certification, because how do we ensure that we don't have kind of misstatements or overstatements or those kind of things? I think health and wellness feels quite fluffy or quite difficult to define. It isn't. It's very definable, but I think that we need a consistent definition and consistent metrics as an industry so that we can ensure that consumer confidence isn't undermined by claims that are overblown or unsubstantiated. So I think that that's going to be a big challenge. But the evidence base is there, so it's not an insurmountable challenge. But it is definitely something that we are beginning to see because consumer demand is increasing. Folks are stating, I'm the healthiest building in the world. It's like, are you? Maybe. Exactly. Prove it. So that's where we come in, right? That's we're the prove it part of it, which I actually think is a great opportunity.
No, look, Joanna, look, fantastic. I'm sort of heard your buzzer going off in the background there. So,
sorry.
I want to sort of keep talking to you a bit longer. But look, thank you so much. And for our listeners, if you want to learn more about Fitwel, where can they sort of find out more information?
Yeah, so fitwel.org is the best place to go. If you press the contact us, we will contact you. We are very much a partner to the industry. We really value the long-term relationships that we have with the industry, and we love the subject, right? We love sharing knowledge about the subject. So we really do see ourselves as a partner to the industry. So yeah, if you go to fitwel.org, either contact us or actually even just download any of the information that we have, we will find you and we will reach out to you. As I said, I'll also be at the Global Wellness Summit in November in Dubai, and I think that's something that folks can attend. It's open for folks to
Fantastic.
attend.
You're right. Well, check out fitwel.org. They're doing some really smart work making buildings healthier, and I encourage you to explore their services. Reach out if you're involved in real estate, asset management, or design. Look, appreciate your time, Joanna, and everyone else. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
Thank you.